Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's bombing campaign was aimed at destroying Iran's ballistic missiles and nuclear program, but could also result in the downfall of the regime. He also echoed Defense Minister Israel Katz's comments on the Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei can no longer be allowed to exist. Netanyahu says it was up to the Iranian people to rise up for their freedom, but Israel may create conditions that will allow them to do it. All right, let's now bring in Professor Christopher Isike, who's the director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria, to weigh in on this current impasse. Professor Isike, it's good to have you on the show today. Good afternoon. So let's begin with the latest information on this conflict, right? Iran has said that there were going to be no nuclear talks while still under Israeli fire. And of course, this at the back of Trump's 2-week notice of what he could decide to do. But Professor, let's also take into note the fact that Trump cannot just make such a decision on his own. We've already seen backlash from his Congress, hugely opposed to the sentiment, and have warned that Netanyahu is in fact not the president of the United States. A scathing warning from the likes of Senator Bernie Sanders.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Look, Trump can make this decision on his own if he can argue that it is a defensive strike. That if he argues that joining the war in Iran is a defensive strike, that would not require Congress approval. However, it could also be argued that this is an offensive, especially because there are those in the U.S. now who are arguing that this is not America's war and that Iran does not pose any threat to America. So how this aligns with America's interests needs to be engaged, basically in America. But I guess it's more of a problem of Trump not knowing exactly what to do and being pushed around left, right, and center without any clear strategy of what he really wants, other than mouthing the talking points of Israel.
Very interesting observations there, Professor. But of course, we know this is not a direct attack on the United States, as you've just rightfully pointed out there. So let's look at then the Geneva talks that are set to take place later on today, where we understand Europe will hope to, of course, establish a path back to diplomacy over Iran's nuclear program, albeit with low expectations, Professor. But what do you foresee as a potential outcome, say the talks don't actually succeed? As we know, Israel continues bombing Iran.
Well, look, the Iranians have said there cannot be any constructive diplomatic engagement while they are under fire, and that's a good position to take. But they are also interested in an end to the crisis, and this is a marked difference between both countries, Iran and Israel, because Israel just bombs without a plan for the day after. Iran is already thinking about what can happen after the bombing ends, and this is why they are opening that door. But all the parties, the Europeans, United Kingdom, Germany, and France, all of them know that whatever they decide will have to have the buy-in of the United States, especially with an egoistic president who wants everything to be about him and what he says.
So, Prof, then let's backtrack a little here just for contextual basis, right? So Geneva is actually where the initial accord was struck back in 2013, if you remember, in order to curb Iran's nuclear program. And that was with the understanding that in return, those sanctions would then be lifted. And this was then, of course, followed by that very comprehensive deal of 2015, which Trump subsequently pulled out the U.S. Out of the particular agreement. And we all saw then how the rest of that has now fed. But what really is a possible move that Trump can institute at this stage, since he basically seems very compromised here and has always alternated between then threatening Tehran, urging them to resume the talks?
Well, yeah, you're correct. This was this peace deal was agreed between them in 2013, and Iran has met its parts essentially. The only country in that region that has a nuclear weapon is Israel, not Iran. The only country that has attacked another country in that region directly is Israel, not Iran. The only country that has killed over 50,000 people, mostly women and children, is Iran. So the question is, who is posing an existential threat to who? So this is a question that all of us as humans globally must answer to ourselves. And I'm glad that at least some of the Western leaders are beginning to take umbrage with this and see the facts for what they are. But Mr. Trump will have to really decide. Assuming he knows what he wants. He must decide one way or another what he wants to do. And if he is interested really in peace, in not causing another war, as some members of his base are now reminding him of, that's what he campaigned on, then he must ensure that America doesn't get pulled into this. He must also rein in Mr. Netanyahu, because Israel would not do any of these things he's doing everywhere in the Middle East without American backing. So effectively, what Israel is doing is backed by America, and at some point America will have to face up to the crimes that Israel has committed in that region. So if Mr. Trump wants to be true to his word for once, that he doesn't want to start a war, he should rein in Mr. Netanyahu and then call for the negotiations to continue, except of course those negotiations that were about to be wrapped up in Qatar on Sunday before the Iran was bombed were just a strategy to distract Iran and make them unprepared for the eventual attack that Israel launched on Friday.
And then, Professor, in the event that Congress as well as lawmakers can actually, in fact, block Donald Trump from going ahead and vetoing or going ahead with deciding to participate in this Iran versus Israeli conflict, how can they do so? Under what legal framework can they undertake this decision?
Well, ideally, they can't veto him, but the Congress, as it currently stands, won't. And not because the Republicans have enough members to actually pull through that kind of decision in Congress, but because across the divide, you have people who think that it is their God's given commandment to protect Israel, irrespective of what Israel does. And that's where the real challenge is, and that the Congress, if Trump was to go to Congress, he probably would get an approval to that strike. The pushback he's getting now is from his base, those who don't think that it is necessarily America's problem per se, and then also with having spoken to Putin and Xi Jinping in China. Trump, I think, is backing out, buying time with his 2 weeks ultimatum to try and reflect on what he should do. But I think he's been well advised to not do that strike, and he will eventually not do it, hopefully, if he listens to everyone who's talking to him about that right now.
Hopefully he listens indeed. Professor, that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you so much for your input. Professor Christopher Isike is the Director of Access at the University of Pretoria, weighing in on the latest developments there between Iran, the United States and Israel.